So we understood that notifications in general were a little bit difficult to use in Figma because they were all over the place.
I cannot believe you actually have Twitter quotes of users complaining about the notifications as motivation in this slide.
I think Twitter is a great place to get lots of really cool feedback, and I love just listening to people talk about what they do or don't like about Figma, and we can use that to help push for projects like this.
So the first version that you decided to take a attempt at, what did that look like?
My very first few iterations were just first, let me remove the thumbnail because we didn't find it all that helpful. And two, how do I structure the information and what elements can I bring in here that would make things make sense? Does this add more value or not?
Howdy and welcome to Deep Dive. This is your host, Jay. I'm super stoked that all of you are watching because today with us we have Tammy.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Tammy, I'm super stoked because you're going to show us the visual refresh of the notifications in Figma. So what did it look like before? Can we zoom into the before and after?
Yeah. So before this is what it looked like. We had multiple lines. We were using a name, event, and file structure with a little thumbnail on the right here. And we updated that to be more streamlined, a little bit easier to parse, easier to read. So from the left version to the right version.
But I have a question for you. I could say that I was very happy with the one on the left. So why even bother with the refresh, right? Because the left one is working, right? It was working for me.
Yes. And so that's what goes into that context deck that I was talking about. I think it was part of a larger effort that was happening more in the back end as well. So we understood that notifications in general were a little bit difficult to use in Figma because they were all over the place. They don't always work together. Sometimes you get multiple notification. There's issues with read sync states. There's inconsistent features and they don't always work well together. And so it generally left people unhappy because they would miss notifications or notifications weren't doing for them what it should have. And so as part of that back-end cleanup, we also wanted to redesign what that notification panel, that feed looked like in an effort to not only make that a little bit easier to parse, but also set ourselves up better for the future so that we can continue to scale notifications as we introduce new features, new products, new whatever, and just setting us up for success as opposed to waiting way too long and then it just being a complete mess and it's completely we felt that this would be a good place to start as we continue to do those other back-end stuff to help improve collaboration flows and just increase trust and just generally just people off the bat.
I cannot believe you actually have Twitter quotes of users complaining about the notifications as motivation in this slide. Can I look at that? This is...
Yeah.
Wow.
I think Twitter is a great place to get lots of really cool feedback. And I love just listening to people talk about what they do or don't like about Figma. And just, it's nice to know that there are people who are really passionate and then you can see what people care about and then be like, look, there are people who care about this stuff. And we can use that to help push for projects like this.
So when someone says out publicly that the UX is terrible or something, how do you view that kind of feedback? Is it you take it in a motivational way? Hey, this is a way of improvement, or how do you process that feedback?
Obviously, it's really difficult because if you work on something, you're like, oh man, I wish they liked it. But I see that as good feedback, right? Because we are building tools that impact people's everyday lives. People are spending 8 hours a day on this tool, and it's really important that we get it right. And so when I see comments or feedback from people who are saying, oh, I wish this was done this way, or I wish this was better, I think it's motivation to be like, oh, let's do that and let's make their lives easier. But also for a lot of us, I think it also mirrors our own frustrations. To some capacity, it's also validation. It's, I agree with this. I also think that this is terrible. I also want to fix this. And I think we should go and fix it too. So I personally see these tweets as sometimes they can be hurtful, but for the most part, I think it's important and valuable source of feedback because they're giving it to you for free.
Yeah. So when you had all this feedback and you figured out the problem statement and you decided that, okay, now I am going to redesign the notifications. So the first version that you decided to take a attempt at, what did that look like? And what was your thinking behind that? Round one.
Right. Again, my context deck comes in a lot of... So the thing that was helpful with the context deck was just like trying to uncover all, like basically pulling apart a notification and then just coming to understand what is the most important part of a notification that people really need. And is every single element actually helping tell the story or the thing that the person wants? And so I use that as a motivator to understand, do we actually need everything that is being shown here? And so we use that to come up with the different iterations that I went through. I think the best example of that would probably be in my very first crit, where I was like, you know what? We don't really need the thumbnails at all. They're not very helpful. They just like get in your way and people don't feel like they really need it. And so I started to think about not just getting rid of that, but also how do we break down the information architecture of this in a way that makes sense? So, for example, the body of any notification is like somebody does something somewhere or something happened somewhere by someone or whatever. And so my very first iteration of that was trying to figure out, okay, how do we organize that? Is it like what happened? So like a merge suggestion happened by Jenny in a branch called file browser. Does that make sense? Or does it make more sense to say Jenny has a merge suggestion in this branch? Like trying to figure out like what is the right information architecture. I was also starting to explore like maybe we can find ways to help people parse things faster. What if we had like a big avatars and some colored icons here? So an exploration where we have an icon on the left here and we have color just to make it very clear. Oh, this is a notification about like an app mention or a comment or etc. I tried a version where we compacted all of that and just made the core focus. We put the new conversations at the top with icons here, make the icons a lot smaller. I tried a version where I included that stuff, but also had like filter buckets with like different variations of different styling of the filters. And my very first few iterations were just like, first, let me remove the thumbnail because we didn't find it all that helpful. And two, how do I structure the information and what elements can I bring in here that would make things make sense? Does this add more value or doesn't? Do you need the icons to be or the avatar to be as big? Does it help you parse your notifications better or not? And that would be like the very first set of iterations.
Because sometimes like in Slack, when I use it, like the unread one, the badgie at the top, it just literally shows me the one that I've not read.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the ones that this was like, we knew we were going to eventually have that. And so my exploration there was like, how do we show that? And so coming up with like different other iterations and versions of that, like maybe it's just unread versus all, or just like only a toggle, and like just giving people, I just had a bunch of different variations of all the different other styles that I had and getting feedback on that.
Wow. And then, so from this, you probably went on to the next iteration, collecting all that feedback. So what changed in the next station?
From all of this, I think that what we realized was that you definitely need a bigger avatar because visually you want something to anchor onto because it helps you guide your eye through the experience. We knew that there had to be something that was much bigger. And the next set of designs, I thought, okay, we're going to be keeping the big icon. I thought about getting rid of the icons entirely. We started realizing that having those colored icons weren't actually that helpful because avatars tend to have color already. And so introducing more color it was cluttered. It felt Skittles almost. And we're like, okay, that's not going to work. And I tried a different version of that where I removed basically all of the iconography. And I said, let's just keep it at like text only. So what if it was just like what happened, where, by whom, and then when? So like a new comment in a specific file by a person, and then it happened here. And so that's me trying to break down the information architecture of that too, and trying different like styles. So like I tried, what if we had actions, but then the actions were like left and it's on the side as opposed to full width button, would that be better? I tried a different variation of if we did introduce icons, can we style them in a certain way that felt like less skittly and what that would look like potentially. I tried version where it was like, again, we separated the information architecture again, which is like, this is about the file sprint review board. And Rob left a comment. Here's what he said. And then only including the iconography there. And this is where that storytelling piece comes into play because I was able to use that to show information architecture and be like, hey, look, like adding this makes it so much clearer for your eyes to parse. So I was trying to really hone in on and focusing on the hierarchy of information and making sure that if your goal is to scan in notifications quickly and get out of the way and like just get to what you need to get to, I'm going to do away with all the variability and just say, hey, this is what it would look like. And your eye should be able to get back to what you're looking for pretty easily. That helped me tell that story.
And then you also have a version or a variation where the avatars don't have any image because in some of the, like in this example, like Rob has a photo, you have a photo, but I have worked with designers where they don't have any photo uploaded. So it's pretty much like this, where the avatar is just like an R or an A. So I like that you have that.
So this was one of the things that I was very careful about because I can sit here and make very pretty notifications, but I also wanted to make sure that it worked for like a real life case. One of the things that I ended up doing, which I didn't put in here because it has sensitive information, but I took all of my notifications and then I stylized them so that we could see literally what it would look like in a real life use case and make it seem as real as possible. And so that helped me understand, okay, here are some edge cases that we have to be considering, especially because we were thinking about how to scale this notification system for the future and planning on making it robust. I had to be sure, am I thinking about all the potential edge cases, all the different notification types, all of that.
So all this is dummy data. That's what you're saying.
Most of the work that I did was dummy data. There was a few explorations that I had where it wasn't, but like those specific pieces, like I removed. Everything else you hear is the original versions.
A quick question, like right here. So you have Nick and then it's an N. But what if you have two people, both with their names starting with an N? Wouldn't it look very similar? Like circles, avatars with NN in them, and the differentiation becomes difficult?
Yeah. So that's definitely true. So maybe one of the reasons why we didn't go with this version either.
Okay. Oh my God, I'm excited to see like how we progress and what new versions you come up with after this iteration.
Yeah. And then from here, we ended up into a very interesting place where based on everybody's feedback, there was two major buckets that we were like deciding between. And one was what we called structured notifications. And one we called, I have it here, one we called natural language. And when I say natural language, we ended up going with the direction of keeping the avatars large. And we included the icons, but then we decided to pare it back down to gray so that it's not as messy and hard to read and hard to parse. And that felt okay. And from here, we were like, okay, what is a structure? Because we could do person in structured notifications, or Daniel reacted in notifications, or like Nick in whatever, and then have it be in natural language and say, this person said this or did this in this place. And that was like a good one version we were excited about or thinking about. And another version, which is the one we were also thinking about, which is just like literally splitting out, like it's just name. And underneath that, it's just like action and then file name. So we call this one the structured notification version, where it's like who did what, where, and then any context you have. And then natural language just went through the whole thing. And I tried to show you or show people what that could look like. And we were pretty split on the design team. We're like, oh, which version do we like better? Which one do we like more? And this is the point where we took it to user research. And we did a test with the two different versions to see which one do people prefer and which one do people like better. And we found that this one the structured version performed better. And this is the one that we're like, okay, let's get this on staging. Let's try it out and let's build the thing. And so that's from there is where we built out the eng spec, and we let it marinate on our internal staging place where people could play around with it and try it out, see what they thought. And once it was real and now people had it in their hands, they gave me feedback. They gave us feedback about actually getting to use this live.
And they, as in external users or internal Figma users?
Internal Figma users. So they would actual internally use it. And then they gave us feedback about that. And so based on people's feedback, we heard that, you know what, even though we pared back the icons here, they still felt really messy and they felt like they covered the person's face a lot. And then
yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, the goal of those icons is to quickly indicate what type of the notification is, right? The smiley is more of like someone reacted. The @ is Nick left a comment. So you're trying to combine both of them with the avatar.
Yeah. And so we got feedback like, hey, like this feels really big. It feels like in your face. It still feels really messy. And so I was like, okay, yeah, that's a good point. And I'm like, okay, how do I take this feedback and make it one step better? And so from here, what I did was I reduced the size of the icons, made it white to have it blend in more seamlessly with the background, which pairs back any of the additional noise that comes from that gray. And I have it so that's right beside that action. And so now that replied is always attached to a reply icon. Comments are attached to comments, and you're not having to look multiple places. I reduced where you would have to look to find certain pieces of information. And always these two are combined with each other. This area is combined with each other. And this was way cleaner, easier to follow, and still gave you the same exact information that this one did. And that's the version that we ended up building out and then shipping to production.
Oh my God, I love it. Also, what I like is because now the icons are set to the right, there's more emphasis on the face. Because it's like when I scan from left to right, I see Rob's face first. And it's like visually from left to right, I see, okay, Rob, and I see that picture very clearly. And I probably know Rob if I'm working with Rob. And then I see the icon, then that icon is right next to replied, and then the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. This was one of the dangers of this version that we were grappling with. We weren't sure, should it be on the left side, should it be on the right side? We found that because of the way that this was, the background color, the size of it often clashed. And having it be on this side, it felt really messy. It didn't feel right. But because we pared back the color here and made it smaller, it worked better. And then it didn't feel as messy compared to having an icon like this be on the right side.
Wow. So much attention to detail, right? Even for some applications.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time. I knew that this was going to be something that would scale really, like it needed to support basically everybody and everything and every different type of notification possible. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what goal do users have, which is like getting in here, reading the thing and getting out without it looking intensely messy. So balancing that visual design and the information architecture while also balancing that user goal of let me find the thing I need to and get out of here as fast as possible.
How long was this project?
I think timeline. We started, I would say mid to early October. And then I officially, the first time I handed it off right around Thanksgiving. And then that was like the bulk of the work. So about a month and a half-ish of focused work. Then the engineers took it over. And then my new layout, this new iteration took maybe like a couple days to do.
Then a question here. I see that you stuck with those wider buttons because in one of the iterations, you just had like a quick action. So why stick with the wider buttons instead of just like the small action?
We stuck with the wider buttons. Part of it was because we wanted to be something like someone invited you or somebody requested to access something is very important. And that we wanted it to be very in your face because it's an action that you have to take. And so it was important that took up as much space as possible that, hey, this needs your attention. Look at this. It's also really important for accessibility to have text and accept, deny. Those are very important to get right. And things like check marks or X's could be more confusing. They are also, if we wanted to scale this further, it wouldn't always be clear what icons would go for which thing. And so we wanted to go the absolute most in your face, most attention grabbing, but also accessible and clear button possible. And that felt like this.
Is there any version that you probably discarded, but you were like, oh my God, this is the most coolest thing I think would be awesome. But once you designed it, the rest of the team or the users were like, that's not going to work.
There was like some of this I thought was pretty exciting. The idea of instead of just having an icon or an avatar, we would use a comment for a comment.
Yeah, it's meta.
Or you would use, yeah, I thought that was pretty exciting. Like, or if you get a face pile of people when there's a little group, we thought this was pretty cool, but we ultimately didn't go down this route because again, it feels a little bit messy too. And there's like a whole system that we'd have to think about this. I thought about like, maybe if you read this comment, maybe does that mean that this blue turns white? Because that's how we do comments in Figma today. Is there a correlation between that? And so I didn't want to worry too much about those kinds of things. And so I was like, well, just keep it simple, keep it easy to parse, and not add too much cognitive overload.
Oh, wow. Okay, that makes so much sense now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tammy.
Thank you for having me.
Hey folks, this is Jay. It means the world to me that you watched this video. Let me know in the comments what topics you want me to cover in the future, and I will see you in the next deep dive.